Okay, this is about fake news, and at least the charge of it. I happen to think they're making it up, but anyway, I want to show you how I was able to figure out that Donald Trump was likely to be the next president of the United States back in November the 17th. That's the first time I actually talked on Facebook about it. November the 17th, 2015. A year ago, even before we knew who the candidates were. And the reason why I knew was because, one, never, very rarely, and in fact only once in my lifetime, has the president that was in office handed power to the person from the same party. It's just rarely done. Most usually after 8 years they want to change. So that's one mark against her. Number two, she was we've had 8 years of a very tumultuous relationship. Now, granted, Republicans didn't help themselves, but the problem is that the President of the United States is unfortunately the one that gets the blame. And Hillary Clinton was not only tied by the hip to Obama and the 8 years that went by, and all the problems in the Middle East, because, by the way, she was the Secretary of State at the time. So she also gets, she was always going to be having to deal with the problems over foreign policy, and it was not a good mix. She was not trusted, so it was a very unlikely chance that she could get to be president. Then, worse, I started hearing that the media, and I'm talking about the actual real media, started going nuts. And they started yelling and screaming and blowing up everything Trump ever said. And the reason why is because they want to sell papers, they want to get you to pay attention to their news. It wasn't because they had an agenda, they just didn't care. It was more about getting money. So that, it was crazy at the time, and I couldn't understand why. And the thing that was really blowing my mind is, at every step of the way, they kept saying over and over again, including politicians, this man could not win. And yet, out of 24 years, this is the first time I've actually seen both parties, the reporters and analysts, all go nuts at the same time. And they were the ones we disliked the most. Okay, these were the people that for years has done nothing. And basically they tell us what we want to hear until they get through the election. And on top of that, we were consistently being treated as if somehow or another we were too stupid to make decisions for ourselves. And they kept talking about he couldn't win. And yet they were attacking him like they were crazy. And worse, they were blowing everything out of proportion. So, like watching Survivor and car wrecks on the highway, we could see that there was a real, we saw that he was basically going nuts. And if you haven't figured this out yet, most people like to watch someone self-destruct in reality, okay? So basically what they did was make it so outlandish that these people went to and listened to Obama. Now all he had to do was be himself, because the media and politicians were blowing everything so far out of proportion, it just was outlandish. And on top of that, most of that was in headlines. It was not actually in the stories, because the stories are always factual, but the headlines are what a lot of people read. And if you happen to agree with the headlines, you're not going to look at it. Now, you're just going to look at that headline and you're going to believe that it's fact when in fact it's not. So there's that problem. I'd also like to point out the fact that at no time was there a close election. Okay? I mean, at no time was there a landslide possible. In any poll that was shown, the largest gap was, I believe, 11 points a few weeks before the election, and that disappeared the very next week. I will agree that Hillary was always over, but it was only usually within the margin of error. So there was no reason to believe there was a close race. And for some crazy reason, the media wasn't paying attention to the polls. They kept saying over and over again, he can't win, oh, he's not going to be president. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have time to listen to everything that comes through the media. And so they just take the headlines, they just take what they hear and they believe, and that's the way they go. And they were listening to the reporters, the analysts, the politicians, and they didn't quite realize that at no time did the evidence actually support their belief. The reporters badly mishandled this, and it was all because they just couldn't believe. No matter what facts were out there, they couldn't believe it. That is the fake news, and it was all opinions. They were reporting facts, but the opinions that they were giving was leading everybody to believe couldn't lose. Now, another thing I'd like to point out that was in actual real media that they call real media, not on Facebook and not on Twitter alone. Okay, it was on those two, but it wasn't just them. And that is, how many times were we seeing people go onto lawns and steal Trump signs? And after a while, you got to where booby traps were being set. And people were consistently going back out and getting those signs. Now, I could be surprised in this, but wouldn't you say that that means they are highly motivated to go out and vote? Consider the fact of how much effort they went to. Not only did they keep putting the signs back out there, but some of them had like staples. They put grease on it. They put it in concrete in the ground. Obviously, they were going to vote, but by the media consistently saying she couldn't lose, they discouraged the people that were going to vote for her. And worst of all, that is why I think the Republicans kept the House and the Senate, because neither one of these two people were liked. And by consistently saying she couldn't lose, some people probably wanted divided government like we've had for the last 6 years, because the President of the United States was going too far. And although we liked him personally, we would prefer him to actually listen, and so we gave him a Republican Congress to deal with. That was a calculated decision on our part. That's why no matter how bad the Republicans got, they kept winning. Okay? And there's a whole lot of reason for that. But anyway, so it was clear they were motivated, and the reporters were doing everything they could to not encourage people to go out and vote. Basically, what happened was Trump was able, as long as he could walk out on stage and not drool, he won. And Hillary, on the other hand, and it's not because she was a woman, it was because everybody kept building her up that she couldn't lose. She actually had to make absolutely no mistake. And she couldn't do that because guess what? She does have a lying problem. She does have an honesty problem. And whether or not it's an actual fair problem, it's there. You can't leave it alone. It's there. You have consistent reasons. It keeps popping up over and over again. Her secrecy, her basically lying to people to their face, whether or not she's under oath or not. Now, I'm not saying she committed a crime. I'm saying that she's lied to us. Anyway, that's my point as far as why this election happened the way it did. Thank you. Bye-bye.